In this second screencast on human health risk, we are continuing on with the topic of biological risks. And we've already discussed that there were non-infectious diseases and infectious diseases. Next, we're going to look at the routes which infectious diseases may be transmitted. So, we have here on the left how infectious diseases spread. And we have a person here, and you can see that she can get an infectious disease from another human. It may also come from domesticated animals, such as livestock and pets. And that is one of the ways, for example, that the avian flu began with animals, birds that were domesticated for livestock. You can see that disease can be transmitted from water, from drinking water. It can be transmitted through the air, for example, in respiratory droplets. It can be transmitted through food. If you've ever heard of food poisoning, maybe caused by salmonella, that would be getting an infectious disease from food. And last, it can be transmitted from wild animals. For example, insects can bite, such as ticks, fleas on rats, for example, which led to the plague, though there's some evidence that it may have been other animals involved there. And one route that is not listed here, which I'll discuss on a future slide, is that infectious disease can also be transmitted from a mother to her fetus or embryo, or also through breast milk. Now we're looking at emergent diseases. Those are diseases that emerged in recent times. They haven't been around for many, many years. HIV is one, Ebola, mad cow disease, bird flu, West Nile virus, and others. So the evidence points to HIV as crossing species from some chimps in Cameroon to them being infectious to humans. So that is something that can occur where a disease may exist in another species. It crosses over to become infectious to humans, and that is not atypical. I mentioned Ebola because I'm sure you've heard of some of these Ebola outbreaks. The issue with Ebola is that it's transmitted very readily, and it has a very high fatality rate. So some infectious diseases may not spread as rapidly as others, and some infectious diseases, such as the common flu, may still be fatal to some individuals, but is less fatal than other diseases such as Ebola. Mad cow disease, I had briefly mentioned earlier, being caused by a prion, or a protein in the brain that's misformed. That actually became not prevalent, but spread through the population of beef cattle because of the practice of feeding parts of cows to other cows. Sort of a cannibalism, if you will. And one of those things that was fed to cows were brains of cows that were infected, and that's how it spread there. It's not a problem in the United States, but in Europe, by 2009, when this was first sort of realized, 166 people had died. And of course, that practice has since been discontinued. But there are still some cases from Canada, and one of the problems with mad cow disease is that when a human gets this form of the disease, this prion, it can take decades for it to show up. And so people who may have been infected prior to 2009 cases may still come up. Okay, bird flu. About, 200 people had died of bird flu. It has a low transmission rate, which helps, but it can be very deadly. West Nile virus is one that had been present in more tropical and subtropical areas, carried by mosquitoes, but it is now in our region as well. It has progressed to the northern hemisphere and to cooler climates. Oops, okay, I was asking you to name some others. I thought they were going to pop up on my list here, but they haven't. Two other emergent diseases come to mind, actually three others. The first is Zika, which had been in tropical areas but now has moved to subtropical areas of Florida. And Zika is particularly damaging to fetuses before they're born. And another one is Triple E, which had not been in our region in New England and is one of those that has now been found up here and can be deadly as well. And of course the third one is COVID-19. Okay, now we're going to look at biological risks from a different angle. We're going to categorize it differently. So we will categorize biological risks as either causing a chronic disease or an acute disease. A chronic disease slowly impairs the normal functioning of a person's body. So for example, diabetes could be considered a chronic disease. Coronary artery disease could be considered a chronic disease. Acute illnesses or acute diseases are those that rapidly impair the normal functioning of a person's body. So for example, a heart attack or a stroke would be an acute disease, something that rapidly impairs the normal functioning of the person's body. Next, we're going to look at chronic versus acute diseases. Excuse me, we already did that. Next, we're going to look at risk factors leading to chronic diseases, those which slowly impair the body functions. And we'll look at those in low-income and high-income countries. Let's start with the diagram on the right, which is high-income countries. And the total percentages here are going to add up to 100%. So we can't compare the numbers directly with the low-income countries. But within all of the leading causes of chronic diseases in high-income countries, it's led by tobacco use and high blood pressure. Now, some of these categories overlap, and you really can't tease them out very easily. So one here is being overweight or obese. That may also be tied to high blood pressure, and it may be related to physical inactivity. Also, being overweight or obese may be related to high blood glucose levels or even high cholesterol levels. And you can see why that might also be related to low fruit and vegetable intake. So all of these numbers may somehow be interrelated, but it's important to look at them so that we know which areas we might target as we try to improve the health in high-income countries. So we might target stopping tobacco use. We might target lowering blood pressure, whether it's from being physically inactive or whether it's from just eating certain foods like too much bacon or whatever. Okay, now when we look at low-income countries, we see that they face an opposite problem to obesity, which is low weight during childhood. Low weight during childhood does affect neurological development. High blood pressure is also an issue, and unsafe sex, which lead to other chronic diseases. And some of these others that can be tackled, we can tackle low weight during childhood, we can tackle unsafe sex, and we can tackle unsafe water, sanitation, and hygiene, as we've talked about before. And so that would be our goals if we're looking to improve physical health in low-income countries. Now we're looking at biological factors which are the leading cause of death in the world, so that's something we'd want to take a look at. And you might not be surprised that these are led by cardiovascular diseases and infectious diseases, followed by cancers, respiratory, and digestive diseases as well. And of course, there are injuries, maternal and perinatal conditions, and others. So targeting these four big ones, respiratory and digestive diseases, cancers, cardiovascular, and infectious diseases globally and within the U.S. are a good idea, a good target. If we look at infectious diseases, we can also see that, again, this is global, not U.S. A great deal of these diseases are respiratory infections because they spread very easily when people are in close contact. Some other leading causes are HIV, diarrheal diseases, TB, and malaria. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a different screencast for toxicology.